All right, so I want you to go to page 34, please, in handling the hard stuff. And where I want to start here is kind of an obscure place, but it asks some really great questions as it relates to everything that we've already set up as it connects to terroir. Okay, and so I'm on the middle of 34 here, and I'm in the third full paragraph, I guess. And it writes the following, and this is kind of like a thesis to what terroir is as opposed to what it isn't, and how to maybe like parse it out a little bit. And it again kind of addresses some of the questions that I'm interested in here. Okay, so page 34, terroir. We believe that there is legitimate debate about whether the concept of terroir can or should be evaluated through the methods of science. Some hold that the concept is essentially spiritual, and that reducing it to soil chemistry and climate charts is what's wrong with the modern approach to winemaking and wine appreciation. Okay? So again, and I know I've been talking about soil chemistry, I've been talking about like climate info as it relates to where grapes are grown and how grapes are grown. And sure, we can measure those things, right? But it's all the immeasurables as it relates to like what terroir is or could be. And so the question becomes is like, can you experience it? Okay. Others believe that emotional connection between a wine drinker, a place in its wine is more important than anything else. The notion of terroir clearly arose in a pre-scientific context. We think that while science is not only the lens to employ, the environmental causes and sensory consequences of terroir expression are tangible, material, and often measurable. The terroir debate can benefit from rigorous investigation. Claims advanced as scientifically valid, but which in fact are not have to be challenged. Okay? So again, just starting with some of the questions here of the notion of terroir clearly arose in a pre-scientific context. And even though now we can get so fine-tuned with winemaking and the winemaking process, there still might be those elements that are, again, either unmeasurable or have to be measured maybe in new ways as it relates to understanding and experiencing terroir. Okay? And then the next paragraph here, there's something I think really interesting here where, again, just to kind of add to the mix, in the middle of this next paragraph, terroir expression is not a single thing. In one wine, it may be found in mouthfeel and another in aromatics, and the origin of distinctiveness may be due to different factors. Thus, the goal of exploring terroir is not to explain properties found in a single bottle of wine, the way we might explain a lunar eclipse or a skin rash, but rather understand more thoroughly how even minute variations of soil, climate, viticulture, which is winemaking, viticulture is vine growing rather, kind of management of the vineyard. Soil, climate, viticulture, and winemaking can have real, perceptible, and yes, magical consequences. So again, maybe there's a distinction here between explanation and understanding, where rather than try to say like this is why the wine is the way that it is, which would be an explanatory method, rather say, well, what can I know more about, or what can I learn more about with regards to this wine, and try to understand it better, right? And so in thinking about kind of those two prompts, the other pages here of like why terroir matters, which is what this reading is called here on page 32, 33. Again, kind of goes back to conversations we've had as it relates to the previous two videos. Okay? The notion of terroir is at the heart of what makes wine special. No other foodstuff, no other agriculture commodity grips the human imagination with such immeasurable force as a great wine from a great wine-growing area. When you taste a great wine, it seems inevitable that a connection exists between those inimitable flavors and the particulars of that place. The soil, the climate, the elevation. We haven't talked about elevation. The aspect, the parcel's unique position on a hill or in the valley. No other connection between food and place is inspired as an extensive a body of literature as the earthly link in wine. Many agricultural products exhibit some degree of regional and subspecies variation, but since wine involves a dramatic transformation of raw grapes through fermentation, the lingering pedigree of origin is all the more remarkable. Wine is unique and terroir is the reason. The Greeks and Romans had wine gods. There's no record of any deity responsible for, say, onions, tasty as they are. So a couple of things worth mentioning here, like going back to your prompt from last Thursday, asking like the uniqueness of wine. Like maybe terroir is it, especially even as it relates to not even beer or other alcohol, but as it relates to anything else. That with some exception, and I've already mentioned this I think in the first video, of like cheese or maybe bread, and some, again, outliers, terroir really does, and terroir is unique potentially for the fact of kind of like the remarkable connection that it has with grape growing and wine making. Okay? Whereas this first paragraph suggests, many agricultural products exhibit some degree of rational subspecies variation, but since wine involves a dramatic transformation of raw grapes through fermentation, the lingering pedigree of origin is all the more remarkable. Wine is unique and terroir is the reason. Okay? And continuing on here, kind of like, just continuing with this little discussion. I'm a little parched here. Yada, yada, yada. Researchers and writers dismiss terroir as a marketing ploy, a fuzzy French philosophical concept, even as an excuse for poor hygiene. Once terroir came under attack, its defenders took up their pens, typewriters, computers, blog posts, and decanters with a vengeance, both in the old world and the new. The world of wine is now awash in talk of terroir, some of it inspiring, substantive, some of it fanciful and downright loopy, right? And this, again, makes sense because, like, we're talking about an abstract thing that maybe exists in the concrete world, right? Like, that's where I think philosophically terroir gets so interesting, is that it exists, but it can't be, it exists. It can be experienced, but it can't be measured. So does it exist at all, right? And that's a fun question. I mean, I think it exists, but I don't know if that's just the philosopher in me, the romantic in me, if that's the right word, right? Of like wanting there to be something more, something greater, something deeper, something more mystical about a wine. And maybe that mysticism lies in this sense of place of everything that contribute to that thing. But the skeptic or the realist would reply, you're crazy. You don't need to be talking about all these fanciful, metaphysical elements of a wine. It is what it is. It's a Merlot grape. It's a Merlot grape from Horseheaven Hills in the Columbia Valley in Washington State. It was planted this particular year, and it was picked this particular year, made by this particular producer for your enjoyment. Don't overcomplicate it. Right? But I don't know. I kind of want to overcomplicate it. So, I don't know. Okay? Yada, yada, yada. In recent years, the notion of terroir has been applied far beyond wine, right? Cheese and their molds, bread, their starters, even breeds of livestock, yada, yada, yada. But again, wine is special in large part because wine grapes are special. No other raw fruit or vegetable has a flavor chemistry as complex as Vitis vinifera, right? Though tea leaves may come close. With hundreds of aromatic compounds of their precursors present in varying degrees and limitless combinations. This cornucopia of chemistry means that wine grapes and wine are quickly suited for register and reflect subtle nuanced differences in the natural environments where they develop. This last sentence here, this cornucopia of chemistry means that wine grapes and wine are uniquely suited to register and reflect subtle nuanced differences in the neutral environments where they develop, goes back to the previous video where I was talking about those regions in Burgundy, right? Volnay and Pommard, right? This idea here that even though in Volnay and Pommard it's the same damn grape, right? It's the same Pinot Noir grape, but it's going to be different. The wine that's produced from these two little regions are going to be different. This cornucopia of chemistry means that wine grapes and wine are uniquely suited to register and reflect subtle, nuanced differences in the natural environments where they develop, even if they are in the backyard of one another. Okay? So there's something going on here. Okay? And if terroir is real, which I'm going to kind of say that I think it is. Show my hand there. Probably pretty clear though. But if terroir is real, then it is helpful that it exists not only as a vague entity in certain vineyards or solely as this kind of philosophical concept, but potentially as a provable, measurable phenomena. But how do we do that? And that's the question, right? How can we measure something that might be fairly intangible, right? And that's where the richness of conversation goes. That's where the richness of drinking wine goes, frankly. And that's where terroir becomes this concept that is so centrally interesting in the world of wine. Both as it relates to like wine itself and like wine discussions, wine tastings, wine experience, but also terroir becomes so interesting and rich because of the intellectual, philosophical, metaphysical conversations that we can start having about it. Okay? And I think that this is a nice start. Okay? I think that this is a nice start of how to engage with the concept of terroir. And as you'll see, there's two other videos listed there. They're both a bit goofy, I'm not going to lie. And in them, yeah, they're both a bit goofy, but they just continue to expand and continue to build on the foundation that we've already set to kind of understand this concept of terroir. And then on Thursday, and please do check your folder on Thursday just for the fact that we just continue on this, but check your folder on Thursday. I've assigned you all to watch a movie that connects to our discussions that we've set up last week and this week, and we'll continue on. So I hope you've made it this far. I'm going to drink some water because I am parched. Cheers.